Okay, welcome back to anybody that has hung around for the 4 months waiting for me to get off my butt and actually record the next episode of this podcast. Looking at you, Zoo. So I've finally decided that I actually need to get around to completing the projects that I start, so here we are. And welcome to episode 1 in this Destiny series, where we go in and we explain basically the small concepts or the big concepts behind the story and the different characters, and then the different settings, the different forces in play in the Destiny story, and all that good stuff. Today we're going to talk about one of the biggest forces that's kind of in the background and the foreground and just all around the game, and that is paracausality. Now, I need to tell you up front, I'm going to keep this very simple, okay? Later on, we can do more of a deep dive into everything and stuff like that, but the intention of this series is to help players that are either new players or players that have been around for a while that don't really understand what's going on in the story. So for the time being, we're going to keep it nice and simple, and then we'll move on after we get through all that stuff. One more word before I get started. This episode is sponsored by me, myself, and I. So if you like what you hear today and you want to stick around and help me produce more content and give me a little bit more free time with my other job and stuff, go ahead and give this a thumbs up or a like wherever you hear this. And if you're feeling really generous, head on over to my Patreon, patreon.com/BuffestHunter. And for as little as $1 a month, you can support me. But at the same time, just liking and listening is good enough for me. All right, let's hop into this wonderful topic, paracausality. Paracausality is the main power in Destiny. It's the power scale, whatever you want to call it. If other games or stories have, the force or the warp or magic or key or the aura or whatever, paracausality is that for Destiny. It is the power behind everything that happens. It's what allows you, as the player character, the Guardian, and some of the other entities in the game, to perform superhuman and supernatural feats. Again, I'm going to explain this simply. That's going to make all the lore nerds rip their hair out. The simplest way I can explain paracausality is that it allows you to break the rules of the universe. It allows you to impose your will onto the universe and change it. Think of it this way. If causality is the laws of physics, paracausality is being able to break the laws of physics. So the universe has rules, and by these rules, everything is dictated. But you have access to paracausal abilities. You can exert your will on the known universe and break those rules. Another way to look at this is your abilities in the game as a Guardian. Having access to paracausal powers already makes your Guardian superhuman. You can run faster, jump higher, and take more damage than regular humans to begin with. But it also allows you to defy the laws of gravity by either jumping, gliding, or lifting yourself through literally thin air, jumping off of nothing, or forcing yourself to greater heights that aren't possible without the aid of machines. The ability to summon grenades, powerful melee abilities, and your supers are some examples in the game of paracausal powers. Summoning flaming swords, hammers, knives, guns, a wall of impenetrable light, a miniature black hole, and lightning that is so effectively devastating that it disintegrates your target molecule by molecule. These are all examples of paracausality. Usually the two schools of thought when it comes to paracausality is that there's the light and there's the darkness, or what we refer to as the light and the darkness. The light and the darkness are primordial forces that are older than the universe, the known universe, and pretty much everything inside of it. These forces just exist. They are not, technically speaking, good or bad, and we don't really know where they originate from. There are individuals or entities behind the light and the darkness that we usually attribute these powers to. The two biggest examples are the Traveler and the Witness. respectively wielding the light and the dark. But that doesn't make either of these entities inherently good or bad. The Witness is kind of a turd and is the collective existential crisis of an entire civilization, but we'll get into that later. Spoiler warning. But as we go through the stories of some things the Traveler has done, and some of the things that Guardians have done, you'll realize very quickly that just because you wield the light does not mean you are inherently a good person. Rather, it's what you do with it that makes you either a good or a bad person, and the same applies to the powers of the darkness. There are other forces in this universe that are paracausal by nature. One of the biggest one that is currently the focus of Destiny's story this season are the Ahamkara, or the Wish Dragons. Yes, Destiny has dragons, just like any good fantasy story should. They do play a very important role throughout the story, but we're not going to get into that right now. All you need to know is that these Wish Dragons possess paracausal abilities that allows them to, quote, feast on the void between desire and reality. This allows them to change the universe or the world or whatever it is into a shape that they so desire based off the wishes of others. It's a little weird and complicated, but that's not what we're going for right now, so we'll get into it later. Just remember they have paracausal abilities, and so they can mess with the rules of the universe because of it. Another example of other paracausal entities that aren't tied directly to the light or the darkness or the Traveler or the Witness are the Awoken, the race of people that are blue and totally not from Avatar. They were created out of a singularity of the light and the darkness colliding. Again, we'll get more into it when we talk about the Awoken, but the long story short of it is because of this singularity, they possess paracausal abilities. It's not really stated if their abilities are of the light or the darkness. All we know is that they can perform paracausal feats without having an association with either of the two main entities that are usually associated with the light and the darkness. So what does being paracausal mean for us, the player character, the Guardian? Well, as I mentioned before, it means we can perform superhuman feats. Guardians are super soldiers. There's no way around it, even though it might not feel like it in the game on occasion, depending on what activity you're doing. The Guardian is an insanely powerful being. The best way I can describe this is you are a demigod. Or, another way to describe it is that you are a warlock. And no, not the warlock like a warlock class guardian, but like in the sense of a warlock from Dungeons and Dragons. You have a pact with a powerful entity that grants you powers. So we have the Traveler. And the Traveler is this great source of light energy. And at one point, the Traveler creates the Ghost. These little biomechanical creatures that follow you around. And, in the game, they'll talk to you, and they'll scan the environment, they'll hack objectives, all that good stuff. And that is your Ghost. The Ghost is what creates the link between you, the Guardian, and the Traveler, which means getting access to the powers of the light. It has been shown on occasion that if you are able to cut off a Guardian's ghost from them, whether it's by killing the ghost or by suppressing its light abilities, you can then kill the Guardians because they have lost their connection to the light. Having access to these paracausal abilities automatically makes you stronger, faster, more durable than any other human can reasonably be. It's weird to think of this in the context of the game, but this is the best way I can describe it. Your shields in Destiny are not, technically speaking, shields. It's not like Apex Legends or Halo or Fortnite, where you can get a shield that's actually, an energy shield. In the case of Guardians, there are ways to get over shields, but the traditional shield in the game is you exerting your will on the universe to make bullets miss or disintegrate in front of you. Your resilience or your durability is literally you exercising the power of your light to stop bullets from hitting you. It basically means your light is so strong that when the bullets come into contact with you, you can basically choose to ignore them. Now, with overwhelming firepower, strong enough weapons, or abilities from other paracausal beings, your shields, quote unquote, can be overwhelmed and break, and you can still die. But another benefit of being paracausal is that death doesn't mean jack diddly squat to you, and if the situation is safe enough, your ghost can simply revive you and you can try again. This is probably one of the best or strongest abilities for the Guardian, is you literally have the ability to throw yourself against the wall until something sticks. I don't want to spoil too many story details from different seasons and stuff, but there is a story about Lord Shaxx fighting an Ahamkara, and in one of the audio logs you can hear about it, he talks about how it was unfair because, quote, you bested me 15 times and I only killed you once. So Shaxx, who I'm definitely going to be doing a whole episode on because this guy is freaking ridiculous and I love it, but Shaxx, one of the greatest fighters in the history of Guardians, lost to an Ahamkara 15 times, but was able to be revived by his ghost, and eventually he was able to win. So again, the ability to defy death is probably one of the greatest abilities Guardians have. Now, there are other paracausal entities in the game that are not associated with the light that are also able to be resurrected, but it's a little bit of a different process, and we'll talk more about that specifically when we talk about the Hive and the Sword logic. Let's talk about some of the powers of the light and the dark really quick and what they are. Now, this is just how I understand it. The lore according to Buffest Hunter. It's not really official Destiny lore or anything, but this is just how I understand it in my brain. The powers of the light are the forces of the universe, and the powers of the darkness are the forces behind the universe. And let me explain a little bit to try to make it make more sense. The powers most often associated with light are solar, arc, and void light. Solar light is often referred to as soul fire, but not soul as in like your soul, S-O-U-L, but like Sol, S-O-L, the star, the sol system. It's talking about our sun. The powers of solar are the powers of the sun, or more specifically, the stars. And if you know a little bit of science, you understand that the power of the stars is nuclear power. This power is crazy, and the explosions and the radiation that comes off the sun and the stars is incredibly destructive. I believe there's a quote in the game from Osiris, and I'm not going to get 100% right, but it says something along the lines of, the same sun that scorches the desert and evaporates the seas is the same power that feeds the plants that sustain life on Earth and across the solar system. So not only is solar super destructive, but it's also life-giving. This is how, as a solar class, you can have restoration to heal you when you're playing the game. Also, solar subclasses tend to be very destructive. I love playing solar on any class of Guardian, whether it's Hunter, Warlock, or Titan. All subclasses are powerful, but solar is about surviving, burning your enemies, creating explosions, high damage, that sort of stuff. Now let's talk about arc. Arc light or arc energy is the power that drives the universe. A good way I can describe this is your brain uses electricity. All living creatures use electricity to function. That is what arc power is, the lightning of the world. The ability for your brain to work and your nerves and your muscles to react and everything like that. Channeling this is arc lightning. And this arc power for Guardians is once again very destructive, but in a different way than solar light is. Guardians are already superhuman. Like I said, they can run faster, they're stronger, they can jump higher than anybody like a regular human. But when channeling arc energy, Guardians are even quicker, they're even stronger. They can discharge lightning strikes from their palms or their fists that incinerate their opponents molecule by molecule. Basically getting struck by lightning on a molecular level. They're able to coat themselves or their weapons in this arc energy to devastating effects. Whether it's literally throwing themselves into battle like Titans do, head first and just sending everything around them, or to channel it into a weapon like hunters do with blade dancers or their arc staff. Being able to dance around the battlefield basically untouchable and unkillable, while dealing devastating damage to their foes at incomprehensible speeds. Warlocks use arc energy to basically turn into Emperor Palpatine, or Goku, depending on what flavor of fandom you're a fan of. Being able to harness the powers and ability of lightning, and then controlling that power to unleash it on their enemies around them, and once again, there's not much you can do. And last but not least of the light subclasses, let's talk about Void. Void is described as the void between realities and worlds. It is the vast emptiness of space. I don't want to call it dark matter because that's something different in this Destiny story that we'll talk about at another point in time. But it more has to do with gravity and molecular manipulation of singularities and stuff like that. Titans can use void light to create shields so dense around them out of the materials of the universe. This is the true overshield of Destiny. Not only can they do this, but they can coat this material on their allies and their allies' weapons to make them perform even better. Hunters can conjure their void light to create a tether, which is basically a gravity well that pulls their enemies in and makes them share the same space-time together, and so they all share the damage you deal. Hunters can also manipulate the space and the light around them to go invisible. Warlocks have the ability to create singularities around them to assist them in defeating off their opponents to amplify their abilities, or to literally summon singularities and miniature black holes to throw at your opponent. And I don't know about you, but I don't know what to do if somebody throws a black hole at me, all right? Like, let's just be fair. Any Guardian can use the Void Light to feed off their enemies to revitalize them. This is where Devour comes into play, by defeating enemies with your Void Light. These are just a few examples of how I think how the light kind of works in the universe of Destiny. It is the forces of the universe, the solar forces, the stars, the arc, the lightning, and the void, gravity, that sort of stuff. It's life itself. Now let's talk about the darkness. The forces of the darkness are not the forces of the universe, but rather the forces behind the universe. And hopefully, again, I can explain this in a way that makes sense. Remember, once again, this is just how I think of it, so this isn't like official or anything, but this is as close as I can understand it. So right now, two of the forces in the game that are most commonly associated with the powers of darkness and that we have access to as the Guardian are Strand and Stasis. Stasis is the ability to control things on a molecular level. I know in the game it's represented as ice, but it's not technically ice powers. It is the ability to control and manipulate the movement of your opponents through space and time, absolute control on a molecular level. Another way to think about this is it's absolute zero. It's talked about in the studies of stasis how an enemy that is encased in stasis or frozen cannot move on a molecular level. They are totally frozen in space and time, absolute control, absolute zero. That's what stasis is. The ability to control the molecules around you and of others. Now, Strand, our Mountain Dew Baja Blast flavored Guardians, is the ability to weave the fabric of reality. That's what these strands are. They are the fabric of the reality. You are literally interacting with the fabric of reality and creating things from it. Tangles, thread links, grappling points, your weapons. Like, it's literally created from the fabric of reality. It's the ability to control the universe, the ability to control the fabric of reality, that sort of stuff. That's what the power of darkness is. Fun fact, one of my favorite things while we're talking about Strand is the fact that individuals that are not paracausal and are not familiar with what Strand is and trained in how to use it and recognize it, can't see it. So this makes me laugh my butt off because in the game, we can obviously see it. We are in tune with both the light and the darkness, and we can now wield Strand. But for any of our enemies that are not paracausal, they can't see it. So it looks like we're just Superman flying through the air, and then all of a sudden, their buddy next to them is being unraveled atom by atom, molecule by molecule. Now, when dictating this script, I've realized that I've said on a molecular level or molecule by molecule a lot, and the reason for that is to attempt to demonstrate how truly powerful these abilities are. This is not something that's like, oh, you blow an enemy up and you might find a chunk of them here or a chunk of them over there. No. When using these powers against enemies, there is nothing left because of how strong they are. Another way to think about how strong your Guardian is and your Guardian's abilities is that canonically, the enemy race of the Cabal are 600-pound space rhinos. I'm pretty sure that's how Ghost describes them in Destiny 1 when you first encounter them. And as a Guardian, you can punch them and completely disintegrate them in one hit. Also, one last important detail about being a paracausal entity. Because you wield paracausal powers that allow you to break the rules of the universe, it means that you are able to fight and contend and even defeat and kill other paracausal beings. This is how we were able to defeat beings like Crota, Oryx, Riven of 1,000 Voices, and even Eris Morn was able to banish Xivu Arath from her throne world. None of these things should have happened by the laws of the universe, but because of who we are and the power that we wield, we were able to exert our will onto the universe stronger than our opponents of what we wanted to become reality. Now, there are still rules you have to play by, but we'll get to that point. So I think this has been kind of a brief overview of what being a paracausal entity is or means. Remember, once again, the simplest way I can describe it is paracausality allows you to break the rules of the universe and to perform superhuman feats. You are exerting your will on the universe to do something that should not physically be able to happen. I think it's super cool. Are you kidding me? That's all I've got for today, for this episode. Hopefully that gave you a very basic understanding of some of the powers in the Destiny universe. And one last tidbit, paracausality is what turns Destiny from a sci-fi into a fantasy story. Because there is basically no way to quantify paracausality besides the fact that, like any other power, the more you train with it, the stronger you get. And because of that, it is now a fantasy story. Space magic. If I boiled it down into 2 words, paracausality is space magic. Once again, this episode is sponsored by me. If you want to help out, head on over to my Patreon, patreon.com/PuffusHunter. And for as little as $1 a month, you too can have early access to episodes like this when I get around to them, and early access to more of my content. But thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Toodles!